Good morning to everybody. I should say good afternoon in East Asia. So depending on where you're from, morning, evening, afternoon. Welcome to this eDialogue, What Future for Small-Scale Farming? So on behalf of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, Foresight for Food, IFAD and APRA, thanks for joining us. My name's Ken Giller. I'm co-chair of SDSN's Network on Sustainable Africa and Food Systems, and I'm one of your hosts today. Our network specifically focuses on SDG 2, Zero Hunger, and has a very strong interest in rural households and smallholder farmers. Jim.
Yeah, hi everybody and welcome. I'm Jim Woodhill. I'm the lead of the Foresight for Food initiative based in Oxford. This initiative is working to strengthen foresight and scenario capacities for food systems transformation. Ken.
Yeah, so as a little background to the eDialogue, we started in July with an opening session, which was followed by a session on local perspectives in August. Today and tomorrow, we're unpacking challenges and opportunities faced by small-scale farmers in different regions of the world. And we've had organized then separate sessions for East Asia, South Asia, Latin America, and Africa. And then tomorrow afternoon in our time, evening yours in East Asia, I guess, we'll be having a synthesis session. We apologize to everybody for the fact that we've been rescheduling sessions, but that's been a bit unavoidable, working offline, trying to get together people from all across the world. So against this background of a wider discussion about transforming food systems in the world as a whole, we're trying to take a deeper look at future opportunities and constraints faced by small-scale farmers. We know that small-scale agriculture is critical to feeding the world, to tackling poverty and malnutrition, but small-scale farmers aren't all the same. They operate with so many different contexts, different sizes of land, access to markets, farms in very different environments, cultures, and we know that farming households have increasingly diverse range of income sources to complement their farming. So in today's discussion, we hope to unpack some of this diversity in small-scale farming. We want to explore the range of future strategies and policies that are needed to support different types of farming households in different contexts. And we hope that the eDialogue will really encourage an ongoing and deeper debate about the future of small-scale farming in changing food systems. So I'm going to hand over now to Jim, who's going to moderate the session this morning.
Great, thanks very much, Ken, and we're thrilled to have such a knowledgeable and experienced panel with us with some very diverse perspectives on what's happening across East Asia. It will just be a very informal discussion. We're going to hear firstly from each of the panelists for 2 to 3 minutes and then open up a discussion around the issues that are raised. But as Ken has mentioned, we really want to focus on the role of smallholders in tackling poverty and good nutrition across the region. How important are they going to be into the future? How is that changing? How are food markets changing? And what does that mean? Different opportunities, constraints to smallholders. What's happening with gender and youth issues across the region? How are different households changing their income sources? Are we getting a much more diverse sort of household income or not? What does that mean for how we think about the role of smallholders in overall economic development? And then particularly, as Ken mentioned, trying to explore what all of this means for some policy directions. All of this we're going to feed into some thinking for the IFAD Rural Development Report for next year, the Food Systems Summit, and also the Global Food Security Conference later in the year. To save time, I'll ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves. I'll probably do it clearer than I will, and ask each of them to give us a 2 or 3 minute sort of introductory view on these perspectives, and then we'll move on to the questions. As a bit of an experiment, we'll be running a mural sticky note program in the background, which people can add more information into, and I'll explain that in a little while, and I'll put the link in the panel. So with that, Fabrizio, let me hand over to you for some of your thoughts, I guess, particularly from a IFAD perspective on the future importance of small-scale farming in the region.
Thank you very much, Jim. So, well, first allow me to introduce myself. I'm Fabrizio Bresciani, the regional economist for the Asia Pacific division at IFAD, and it's a pleasure to be here today. Just to know a few thoughts that occurred to me while reading just a few days ago. I went back to the rural development report that was published by IFAD in 2019, and the focus of that report was on rural youth. Well, no, in reading the regional chapter, chapter 9, you find really some striking numbers, right? So these are figures that have been made possible by matching data on individuals, in particular young people below 25, with population density in the area where they live. And so you get a picture of how the youth is distributed in East Asia and Southeast Asia across rural, semi-rural, peri-urban, and urban areas. So one interesting fact is, okay, we have about 55 to 60% of the youth live in either rural or semi-rural areas in this region of the world. But the other interesting aspect is that 60% of the youth that live in rural areas actually spend time on their farms, and this gives a sense of a farm population in rural and semi-rural areas, which is a little bit contrary to the image that one usually hears about of an aging farm population. Interestingly enough, the diversification of income sources. So while 35% of the youth who live in rural areas actually earn an income from non-farm activities, this jumps quite quickly to 50% in semi-rural areas. So the kind of message one gets is that one can expect that as the transformation of rural and agricultural areas makes progress in this part of the world, we will see young people moving quite quickly to new occupations. And precisely this could be one of the important channels through which the transformation of agriculture and the rural sector in Asia and Southeast Asia could actually contribute to the broader growth of the economy. And then a very 10 seconds on a second interesting data. In just 10 years, the amount of farmland that is being leased in China increased by more than twofold. So that's quite interesting, because in such a short amount of time, such a rapid increase in the amount of farmland that is being leased, it really gives a sensation to know something important is happening in terms of the consolidation of small farms in a economy where the rural and agricultural sector is rapidly transforming. I hope we will be able to have a little bit of time to discuss these concepts further during this event. Thanks.
Just a very quick follow-up question, Fabrizio. I mean, if we go back to the 2008 World Development Report on agriculture, and argued how critical agriculture is to poverty alleviation, how important do you see small-scale farming to tackling ongoing across the region, or is there now such diversity in the economy that it's less important than it might have been in the past?
Well, the things have changed quite a bit since the old days in which at least when we're talking about East Asia and Southeast Asia, when we're talking about the importance of broad-based agricultural growth as a way to make a substantive impact in terms of reduction of poverty in rural areas. At that time, the broad-based agricultural growth was seen as important because it was a way of increasing the income of farmers. It was important in order to stimulate the consumption of goods and services produced in rural areas, and therefore, it was a sort of the dominant paradigm about the role of agricultural growth in poverty reduction. Since then, things have changed quite a lot in this part of the world. Agricultural share in GDP has come down quite a bit. It's now about 15 to 20% in most countries. It still absorbs or employs a large share of the total labor force. But the contribution of agriculture to poverty reduction through the direct growth of agriculture per se is much more limited nowadays. Agricultural growth continues to be an efficient way of reducing poverty, but its effectiveness has diminished simply because the sector has gotten smaller. But at the same time, commercialization of agriculture has become much more pronounced. And this means that basically farmers are linked to other sectors of the economy much more of what they used to be in the past. In fact, actually now you can start thinking about a consolidated agribusiness sector, of which agriculture is sort of the core part. This consolidated agribusiness sector is a huge employer of unskilled labor across the economy. When it grows, it really absorbs a lot of employment among unskilled workers and supports, the growth of wages for these type of workers. So,
thank you. Faurizio, we'll come back to a little bit more of this discussion, but that's landed a really good starting position. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Cheers.
Irish, let's come to you and hear a bit of your perspective, which I think will also come to some of these issues around youth, but also gender and the role of agriculture in tackling some forms of marginalisation across the region. Oh, you're muted, Irish.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, good morning and good afternoon to all. So I'm here representing AFA, an alliance of 22 national farmers organizations in 16 countries with combined membership of around 13 million small-scale women and men, family members, fishers, indigenous peoples, forest users, herders, and pastoralists. And AFA members, as I have mentioned, belong to the 43% of East Asia population residing in rural areas, of which 48%, of course, are employed in the agriculture sector. So as you have already set in initially even in the previous discussion, East Asia agriculture is dominated by small farms. And we know that smallholder family farmers have been sustaining societies and also have been conserving agrobiodiversity. And small farms have contributed to local food security, and more so in the situation that we have now, the health crisis we are experiencing now and the associated lockdown measure. We also know that there are many arguments like small-scale agriculture or farms being more labor intensive rather than capital intensive and are more diverse. I think that's the strength. It's more diverse, and because it is it uses family labor and uses more natural resources locally, then it's really contributing to climate change mitigation. And yes, you also mentioned in your briefing note that our food systems are changing dramatically, diets because of diet changes, preferences, and that we and also we are witnessing the change in food markets, like penetration of supermarkets, of fast food. So where is the place now for smallholder family farmers? For AFA, I think because of the changing food system, we are now focusing on organizing smallholder farmers into cooperatives. And there is now an increasing attention and investment in consolidating smallholder farmers to be integrated into the changing food systems and food markets in East Asia.
Lovely, thank you, Irish. Really interesting. What do you think's the really biggest challenge that AFA faces in supporting its constituency?
Yep. I think we recently had our regional conference on sustaining small-scale agriculture in Asia Pacific, and one thing that really came out of that discussion is really consistent policies in supporting the welfare of smallholder farmers, and especially women and youth. So yeah, it's the commitment at the policy level that we have highlighted as one of the key barriers.
Okay, great. We would certainly like to come back to some of this policy discussion a bit later in the call. So thank you, Irish. Graham, let me go over to you from Grow Asia and hear a bit of your perspective on these issues.
Yeah, so my name is Graham Dixie. I'm the Executive Director of GrowAsia. GrowAsia is a multi-stakeholder partnership. We have 6 country partners around the region, 500 partners. They form working groups. So there's 46 working groups who are doing 50 projects. And those working groups come from, and the 500 partners come from all sectors, from the business sector, from the producer sector, from the public sector, from civil society. And they work together to work up projects which basically are focusing on raising the incomes of farmers and lowering their environmental footprint. And then those are meshed together by a central secretariat, which not only does the cross learnings across the region, but also does individual regional programs on COVID, on fall armyworm, on responsible investing. So that's essentially what we do. Jim set us the target of being challenging and thought-provoking. So I think what he wanted us to do was to rattle your cages a little bit. So I thought I would take a slightly different view, which is that, a little bit controversial, that the point I'm going to make is that if we focus exclusively on the smallholder farmer, it constrains our thinking and our possibilities, that we need to take a broader view on what are the realities that are happening in the food system, and doing it in that way and looking at the broader agro ecosystems, we will not only improve rural poverty, which is 2 to 4 times what it is in the urban environment, but at the same time raise the livings of farmers. And there is there's a bit of a myth around smallholder farmers that thinks this is something that everybody wants to be. Actually, the surveys show that if you ask a smallholder farmer, does he want to be a smallholder farmer? Generally they say, well, a lot of them say no. I think 67% of Indian farmers said they didn't want, they would like to do something different. I think in Mozambique, something like 47 said, we want a job. So let's not create it as being some sort of myth, ideal. It's not. It's a very tough piece of work. You have very little control over price, no control over price, not much control over weather or yield. So it's a tough job. But we have a big advantage, and the big advantage is that the demand for food and food spending is going up quickly. Within the whole of the Asia, Southeast Asia, China region, the spending on groceries is about $4 trillion a year. And it's going up at a compound growth rate of about 6 to 6.5%. Essentially what it means is that the spending on food will double over the next decade. That is a huge opportunity. But it does mean that if we are going to be able to drive more income into the rural economy, and let's be very serious about this, the thing that changes lives, the thing that reduces rural poverty is increasing the cash flow into the rural economy. And the agricultural sector and the agribusiness sector is one of the few that can significantly increase that. And with that increasing demand, there is the real hope that a tremendous increase in cash can hit the rural economy, and it will not only impact on the lives of farmers, it will impact on the jobs surrounding that, and it will create opportunities for employment, all sorts of things. So that's what we need to do. But how are we going to get there? We do need a farming sector which is younger, which is more technical, which is sharper, is more professional, and they probably need to have a larger land area, because it's difficult to make a sensible livelihood. And if you want to keep young people on farms, they need 2 things. They need a sensible livelihood for them and their families, and they need the services that they want. They want the infrastructure, they want the education, they want the health, they want the internet. So I think we should be focusing on that particular sector. And that if we paint a mental picture of what will farming look like in the future, if it's going to feed that urban demand, they not only need to be more professional in being able to deliver high quality food that's safe, but the whole of that supply chain needs to be significantly improved. And the thing that we never talk about, you have to get the market servicing right. You can't just turn up with one chicken. You need to be able to have consistent quality. That's what the demand, and the demand is the thing that will really, really drive change. And the final point that I just want to make is that actually, when we really think about it, and we think about, and I'm talking here about the commercialization of the smallholder farmer, it is very often the things that will most impact, and not the obvious things. It's not about how much fertilizer you apply to a mango tree. It may be some other things. I mean, in the COVID conversations that we've been having, what has shown up is the weaknesses in the food supply chain. And one of the first one is first mile connectivity, that the logistics of collecting product from farms is very high. In Indonesia, those initial chain of truckers are charging 300% margin. So that there will be, if you can look at the technology that's coming out of the urban sector, there will be technologies emerging which will enable consolidation of loads, reducing the transaction costs. The next thing is mobile money. You know, farmers don't take credit cards, but we are moving to a less cash economy. Mobile money is one of the ways that you can pay a farmer digitally, and this is what agribusinesses want. They can convert it into cash with the local agents. But it also opens up the third area, which is digital marketing platforms. One of the key environments there is e-wallets. And what has happened out of COVID is there's been a tremendous flip in the demand and the need for digital marketing platforms. And then finally, underpinning all of that has got to be a stronger digital network. And yet we see that often in Philippines is a classic example, there are areas with very, very weak connections. And yet there is a thing called the universal access funds, which were funds set aside to be able to invest in rural digital infrastructure, which has hardly been touched. So I'm saying that actually there are a network of things which can increase the flow of rural money into the rural economy, improve its effectiveness, be much more in tune with the way that the food system is changing, and those will bring in new money. They will not only raise the income of farmers, but they will provide multiple jobs. And so we're expecting to see surrounding those farms a network of farm service businesses. The guy who drives the tractor, the person who operates the drone, the person who organizes labor gangs to harvest those mangoes at labor's peaks. So I'll leave it at that. Over.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Graham. So I think you're painting a very clear story there about needing, if we want to tackle poverty and inequality, we need to be thinking about the benefits from the entire food system rather than just focusing back on farming itself. But that then potentially argues for quite some structural change in the way farming is functioning and linking into those food system opportunities, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Brilliantly put. Yeah, I wish I could have done it as succinctly as you did it.
Great. Marlene, over to you. And we had a very interesting discussion last night in leading into this. So very keen to hear some of your perspectives on this. And I think particularly some of your thoughts on who perhaps is being left behind in this whole story and how do you tackle those that are perhaps being left behind. I think you're on mute, Marlene.
Thank you, Jim. And I'm Marlene Ramirez from AsiaDRA. It's a regional partnership network of rural development NGOs and agri-agencies dedicated to empower farmers' organizations, rural people's organization by building capacities for service delivery, for engaging government to influence and to benefit from public programs, and to build capacities for managing viable businesses. And I think what I wish to contribute at the start is looking at how smallholders, family farmers are responding to the challenges brought by the recent pandemic and the important role that smallholder sector is playing, and what is it that we could do together to leverage on this very important role that was highlighted by the pandemic. But as we all know, even before the pandemic came, the smallholders or family farmers are already grappling with a host of challenges. And these are the issues that are being looked into by the UN Decade of Family Farming on access to productive assets, productivity system support, wage structures or farmers' organization, access to markets, recognition, low investment on women and youth, and the disasters that brought by climate change or political conflicts, and all these leading to food insecurity and rural poverty. Then the pandemic came, highlighting new challenges, or I would say also highlighting the gaps in our work, supply issues, were affected due to restrictions on labor movement, logistical bottlenecks, falling market demand, which impacted on the financial liquidity of small businesses, and also linked to the capacity of affected farmers to repay loans. But we look at this as, I would say, temporary setbacks that well-organized farmers' organizations are able to overcome. Farmers' organizations who are able to engage governments to benefit from recovery and social amelioration programs, farmers groups able to negotiate with lending institutions to restructure their loans, and able to reorient or re-strategize their programming, and able to look beyond the pandemic and start eyeing or jumping up on opportunities. So from there, what we observe or what we saw is that indeed, when we talk about rural resiliency, one of the important streams is that having strong local associations that are able to overcome setbacks. But the critical issue here is that very few smallholder farmers are organized, and even those that are organized, many have to transition into structures that will allow them to optimize opportunities brought by the pandemic, the silver linings of the pandemic, and more importantly for us, that being able to participate in the value chain, regardless of your size, or whether you are organized at the moment or not, but there is an opportunity for you to be part of it. So we at least in the Philippines, for instance, we saw that other sectors went down during the pandemic, but the agriculture sector posted a small growth, at least 3%. So it's really that is like an opportunity that agriculture is a sector that has the potential of bouncing back. It's not as badly affected as by other sectors. And there are silver linings that we should frame in favor of small-scale family farmers. This pandemic has shown to us that particularly for small-scale family farmers, the issue that we faced, the food and nutritional insecurity, was the small-scale family farmers who helped us respond to this issue. They were there on the ground. They have produced, and they even with the logistical constraints, many of them managed to bring their produce in the market and supply urban communities, city consumers, including ourselves, with nutritious and healthy food, because that is what they do. And not just for the market, we also saw that many of these smallholder farmers, in fact, in the rural areas, managed to feed their family. So that household food security was responded to, and that they were the ones who brought food to the cities. But I think the important another gap that was highlighted to us, as I mentioned earlier, is the importance of this very strong producer and consumer relationship, urban market linkages, which we have been talking about, we have been experimenting, we have a number of pilots, but we felt that that we should have foreseen this pandemic and had a stronger mechanisms, food hubs, organized or managed by agri-cooperatives working with smallholders, because that is very clearly before us. Now we see the prospects and the possibilities, and we are excited with it. And of course, it also brought us that need to reflect on the policies that we have, and therefore the importance of engaging governments on policies that will ensure that smallholder farmers, women and youth, are not left behind, but in fact are able to overcome the challenges of disasters or pandemics, but also able to transition effectively into more sustainable and viable existence. So I think I'll stop here, and it's just to highlight the importance of having vibrant and strong farmers organizations, agri-cooperatives that will help them move from where they are now and make full use of the opportunities that we see in the current context. Over to you, Jim.
Thank you, Marlene. And I think this point about organisation and building the capabilities of farmer organisation was something that was also brought up by Irish. And I mean, I think something that was really interesting when we were chatting earlier was your comment about the need for much more integrated policy, which I think is something we can come back to in the next part of the discussion. So with that, let me go over to you, Andrew, and to introduce yourself and give us your perspective on these issues. I'm going to try and keep us sort of a little bit tighter in time so that we've got time for an ongoing discussion.
Okay, no problem. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome from Singapore. Like Graham, I'm here in Singapore and been here quite some time, 30 years now, so this is really home. I'm Andrew Powell. I run a small company in Singapore that Paul Teng and I founded in 2005 called Asia Biobusiness. We set up Asia Biobusiness to try to make a difference, have fun, as Paul and I always do, and pay the bills. And we just about do everything on that. And we certainly hope that we make a difference, but that's not up to us to make a decision on that. We work very much with our feet on either side of the fence, both in the public sector and the private sector. We work with governments, USDA, Australian government, Irish government. We work with the multinationals that you're all familiar with, both from the ag and the food sector. And we also work with SMEs and help them with their commercialization and mentor startups as well. I was, coming later on in this sort of session, most of the things I wanted to talk about have already been talked on, but I wanted to sort of touch base on the whole thing about COVID and how we need to really appreciate that this has impacted the smallholder farmers. It's the fact that industry has been, not ag industry, but industry and development in cities has been impacted, will in fact impact the smallholder farmers as well, because a lot of them derive income from this the sector. And with that slowed down around the region, we have to take on board that damage that is done to the families of the smallholder farmers and think about short-term solutions. In the long term, I think we also, or medium term perhaps, we need to also think about the changes that consumers have undergone in respect to, as a result of COVID, and what they want. And what all the studies are showing, that the consumers want a better connection with the produce that they eat. They want it to be safer, and they want to really know where it comes from. And we really need to ensure that the smallholder farmers are able to satisfy the needs of those consumers so that they can extract the most value from the things that they produce. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, which is more in the medium to long term, and also touches a bit on what Graham was talking about, is that we really need to think about a whole of system approach to changing the agri-food ecosystem. One of the projects we're working on at the moment is a development of a centre of excellence for smallholder farmers based here in Singapore. And it reflects the complexity of the challenge in that we have a multi-stakeholder group to address this change that we need to have in the agri-food ecosystem. We have multinationals like Bayer, IFC, DFAT Australia Development Agency, Stockholm Environmental Institute, educational institutes like Murdoch and Circa, and a whole host of other groups who are really keen to partner with us to advance the agenda of ecosystem change for the betterment of the smallholder farmer community. So it's an interesting challenge, but it can't be handled by just one group. It really needs this multi-sectorial and a multi-stakeholder approach. Now, I'm a seed biologist, and I do think that technology has to play a role in the betterment of the smallholder farmers. Hardly surprising there. But I'm not so naive to think that we must also appreciate the change that the new technologies is impacting or bringing about for the smallholder farmers. We have to think about the social aspects of this change. Change brings about angst and concern in populations, and we really have to think about how we manage that concern. We need to ensure that there's trust in the things in our interactions with the smallholder farmers. They need to understand there are benefits. They need to understand there are control, and the whole thing must be fair. These are all things that, as a risk communicator, which I'm also am, need to be taken account of when you're communicating with people who have concerns about things. Farmers are just like us. We get worried about things. We need to address those issues as well. And in Africa, I think we've already seen social science really contributing to the development of the smallholder farmers. And I think we really need to think about that as well, particularly in our region.
Right.
I think that's all I got to say, really.
Thanks. Thank you, Andrew. Very, very interesting work that you're doing with Paul as well, I know. So, Tran, let's come over to you. And I mean, you're somebody with a tremendous amount of practical experience and linking that to the policy world. So we're very interested to hear on your perspective from your work in your country. So Tran, what's some of your views on this, and perhaps your reflections, particularly on the policy implications?
Thank you very much. So good afternoon in Hanoi, everybody. First, may I introduce myself? So my name is Chen. So I'm the Director General of Institute of Policy and Strategy for Agriculture, and very nice to meet you there, and very nice to meet some of my friends there. I'm happy to see you. As you know that in Vietnam, the small farmers still play very important roles. With agriculture, there's about now the 35% of agriculture still working in labors. However, the agriculture GDP contribute only for 14% of GDP. Based on the number of the GDP, the share of agriculture is still reducing. However, you know, the farm size of Vietnam very small. That's why the Vietnam now still have around more than 8 million farmers. Yeah, and recently the income from agriculture also reduced in for rural household. According to Vietnam Households Living Standard Survey, the income from agriculture of the rural household is only 20%. Yeah, so it means that the now the non-farm is play the very important roles. Yeah, and under the COVID-19, the Vietnam now looks to control very well. Even we passed the second wave of COVID pandemic. However, you know, the farmers and agriculture in Vietnam were still impacted differently. For example, the farmers with the necessary food crop like rice have very good, how can I say, the positive impact. The price of rice increase, the price of some kind of vegetable increase. However, for the farmer with the branded crop like coffee, tea, rubbers, the price will reduce. So according to our survey, around 70% of the farmers were impacted, in which there's the farmer who base on the non-farm income were impacted more seriously. The farmer that the income based on agriculture have less impacted. So it means that you know, the picture for farmers so differently based on the different activity. And related to policy, the government of Vietnam, you know, control very well up to now. And they also have provided different kinds of policy to support not only the small farmer, but for the peoples, especially the vulnerable people, the poor people. And the government of Vietnam provide direct money for them. And we also created some kinds of like a food program for the poor farmers. And recently, we also changing the policy. We also support the enterprise because we support enterprise because the enterprise create the employment for the non-farms. How can I say, the people who living in the rural area but who work in the non-farm activity. As I mentioned with you, the 80% of the income from the non-farm activity. That's why if the government can stimulate the operation of the enterprise, especially enterprise in rural area, so it will create the employment for rural area, and by then it create the income for them. That's why the the policy not only focus to support the food, the direct money for rural people, but also to support the enterprise. So that is the key important things. And the second thing is that the government very concerned on the how can I say to support to buying the agriculture product from the farmers by trying to pushing the export and also to try to pushing in domestic markets. That is a very important policy because it not like make the supply chain die. It create the smoothly operation from the farm to the consumer. That's why I'm really agree with Mr. Graham and also Mr. Andrews about the support the farmer through the like a food system and also to stimulate the value linkage. So I think this is the the third policy. And another policy is that now the government try to how can I say redesign some like a training program for farmers, because at the moment, you know, I agree with most of previous speaker when you mentioned about digitals. That's why the digital now very important. But before farmers only trained by some kind of very traditional skill. That's why here the digital online market is a very important, and that is some kind of main policy response to for support the farmer under the COVID-19. And according to our survey, the farmer also have some kind of response themselves. They try to change the way they sell their product. They not like sell to trader. They try to connect with the consumer through the online, and they try to contract with the logistic provider. So they do not meet directly, but their commodities still like a transfer from the farm to consumer, and they also changing the way to buy input. They still like keep producing, they do not suffer from the interruption from the input driver. So I mean that's kind of the response and the policy from the governments. So right. Thank you very much for your listening.
Thank you, Tran. Really interesting to hear those views, and I think that comes back to the point that Graham was making about the importance of seeing this from a much broader sort of systems approach and the whole wider economic development opportunity. Yeah. What I'm going to do is just take a little break here and introduce a thing called Mural. While I'm doing that, the panelists might like to think about how you would like to react to what you've heard from the others. I think there's two particular questions I would like to put back to you. One is coming back to who's being left behind in this whole story and how do you address those that are being left behind? And the other one is, what are some of the bigger structural changes that you think are needed to pick up these commercial opportunities? I mean, do farmers have to be at a much bigger size, or can farmers mix small size with off-farm income and still be viable commercial farmers? So, you know, what are some of the bigger structural changes that are needed, and how do you tackle those that are still being left behind? But before we come to that, let me share my screen, and I've just posted again this tool in the chat box for everybody. And here we go. Oh, Andrea, can you allow me to share my screen?
Yes, just a second. Yeah, it should be good.
Yep, should be good. Right. Can you all see that? Ken?
Yes.
Yep. So what I'm sharing with everybody here is a online program called Mural. I've shared you the link. You can see that in this, Ken has already been adding some of the reflections and ideas we've heard from the panelists. what we'd like to do is to invite any of the audience to add in your thoughts. So you can go onto this alongside listening in Zoom and add ideas. If you scroll your mouse in, you can just scroll into whatever part of the diagram you like. You can then, sorry, I've just got to reduce my window a little bit. You can go up here to the top corner. You can click on, you can drag a sticky note, you can put it in here, and you can just start typing whatever ideas you would like. We've broken this overall mural up into the 5 questions that we're asking, exploring what are some of the changes going on and what are some of the implications. I won't go into detail here, but we're going to leave this live for a few days after this session. We will summarize some of the discussion that we're having now in this. And if any of the audience would like to add in your ideas into this as we're going over the next half hour or so, please do so. So just to reiterate how you use this, if you click your mouse and hold it, you can move it around. If you scroll your mouse, you can go in and look at stuff in detail. And to add an idea, you go up in the corner, click the sticky notes and drag a sticky note in, and then you can start typing in it. You can just scroll in to look at your sticky note in detail. So please, we encourage all of the audience to go in here and put in any thoughts or ideas that you would really like to add to this discussion, and they'll be combined into the summary of what's emerging as a really interesting discussion. So go to it, everybody. It's a little bit of an experiment, we realise, but hopefully we're also introducing you to a interesting online facilitation tool. So now I'm getting back to the thing. I need to stop sharing. Okay, so with that, let me come back to the panelists and let me come back to this first question. Who's being left behind and what are the opportunities for tackling those who are being left behind? Marlene, perhaps I could come to you first and then maybe back to Fabrizio.
Okay. Well, for us, working with, we call it rural people's organizations, but that's really mainly smallholder, family farmers, rural women and youth, and of course you have the indigenous peoples. And an important element for us to be not left behind is to seeing these communities organized at the local level, at the provincial level, at the national level, and even linked at the regional level. Because these are, we believe that a key element is of the development process is inclusivity, and unless they have this power of the collective, they will always be disenfranchised. In the percent of farmers are actually organized, only 10%, and that's a very small amount. So, and therefore, that big demand for us, that call to invest in organizing, whether it's in relation to an economic activity, commodity-based, geographic, sectoral, we would, and it's a running agenda for us that there be an opportunity for communities to organize themselves. Mm-hmm. And in Southeast Asia, the legal framework for organizing is not present in all countries, or maybe not as well defined, that allows farmers' organizations to organize as cooperatives are already there. But it is, there's that hope because at the ASEAN level, there was this mandate to a roadmap to organize, to strengthen agri-cooperatives. And we believe that is an important mandate at the ASEAN level that can be used by farmers' organizations who are still not in that structure that we believe will allow them to be able to play well in the marketplace or to be able to engage governments with the needed power.
Right.
So that for us is and being organized also allow them to confidently engage with the other players in the market, including the private sector, including the big farmers organization and donors and government.
Right.
So that is for us an important element.
Thank you, Marlene. I mean, let me just go to Fabrizio then. So, I mean, we're hearing the importance of organising those who are perhaps being left behind, but I mean, are there large groups that are going to have to leave agriculture, or is there an opportunity for people to have a mixed space? I mean, there still are very, very large numbers of very, very small farmers across East Asia. Are they finding a way of having a mixed livelihood? I mean, from an IFAD perspective, you know, where do you see the biggest groups, in what sort of locations or what sort of characteristics that are being left behind? And what's your view of how you tackle that, and where the opportunities may or may not be in this wider food systems change that we've been hearing about?
Yeah, thank you. I think, no, in terms of those that are left behind, we should draw attention to the indigenous population, people that live in, indigenous people that live in remote rural areas, often characterized by low connectivity, difficult to reach, and so forth. Women whose access to productive resources is often hampered by social norms and sometimes a legal framework that is not helping them in achieving their or being able to live an empowered life, let's say. And then youth, and youth again is an important group of people that live in rural areas. As I mentioned initially, they are active, they are ready to jump into new opportunities. However, it's very difficult for them to access the finance, the land, and the technology that is needed in order to oftentimes get started with their own enterprises. In terms of who will be left in the rural sector, I think this is you need bigger farms in order to match the kind of income that you can get from non-farm activities, and the professionalization of farmers that is essential, and to which Graham also referred in his contribution. I think requires that we need to see farmers being able to consolidate gradually their small farms, and that actually is a course of development we should encourage, rather than seeing corporate farms taking the lead in this process of land consolidation. This will make a difference in terms of how rural development will look like in 10, 20 years from now. Now, this outflow of smallholders from agriculture, for some of them is desirable. As Graham mentioned, many smallholders would rather do something different. We need to create the conditions for this exit to happen in a way that promotes their livelihoods and their living standards. For this, we need to set the right set of institutions as of now, because this process is going to last over the next 10, 20 years. And so land policies will become very important in making sure that the smallholders that are not competitive anymore can actually make the best use of their land assets. And also to allow those that want to make farming their main livelihood, then they can actually are able to access land in a secure way, meaning that the land they access is land in which they can actually make investments. So I would definitely draw attention to the importance of setting the right land institutions and land policies to prepare this longer process of structural transformation that is going to happen in the smallholder sector.
Right. Thank you, Fabrizio. I mean, Irish, could I come to you? I mean, do you have a sense of where things sit across the region from a policy perspective? So we've heard about a lot of the things that need to happen in terms of improving farmer networking and organisation, of getting land consolidation approaches, of providing access to finance. I mean, are policies across the region heading in the right direction, or is there still a lot of work to be done to try and get a more enabling institutional and policy environment?
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Before I respond to it, I just wanted to make a comment on the statements made by Marlene and Fabrizio. Sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to make a short statement. So I think I wanted to reinforce what has been said on the consolidation of small farmers rather than having corporate farming, because it's interesting that during the CFS event, the CERES 2030 research actually have three interesting findings, and one of which is that they found out that if farmers belong to cooperatives or self-help groups or autonomous organizations, their income actually increases. Because of the shared network and resources. So, that groundbreaking research reinforced what we have been saying in AFA, that I think I want to use the word also coexistence. There are arguments of corporate farming because of the ongoing landscape transformation, but we also know that smallholder has a role, especially those that I already mentioned earlier, like in carbon sequestration, in diversification, in agrobiodiversity conversation. So these are, big contribution that smallholder farmers have. So going back to your question, it's interesting that we had the sub-regional discussion on priority policies, and as also mentioned earlier, it's still, the priority is really still on land policies that are favorable to smallholder farmers, to indigenous people, to pastoralists. And the smallholders, I think, is grateful of the UN Decade of Family Farming, because in the next 10 years, we hope that policies favorable to supporting the land rights of smallholder farmers and policies that is supportive of co-op formation will actually, we can realize that in the next decade.
Great. Thank you, Irish. Graham, I mean, what opportunities do you see for making the sort of commercialization more inclusive, and what's going to create opportunities for more people at the lower end of the economic pyramid, so to speak? Mike, Graham.
Let's not waste my breath under the room. Yeah, so all of that. So let me leaving people behind. So that the basically the findings, when you talk to people who try and link markets and farmers together, they will say actually, the consensus view is not all the farmers are suitable for joining in. They're not particularly farmers. They've got a bit of land, they feed themselves, but they're not really interested. So there is a portion of people who are just not in any way have the attitude or the outlook to take on that particular role. Then there's the issue of transport and their distance from the market. There's quite a lot of evidence showing that actually incomes start diminishing pretty quickly after you start dropping off 2 hours away from a major market. And we've seen again and again examples, and one is in Laos just recently with a new railway line opening up, which has opened up a whole new opportunity for farmers in that area. So actually, by building roads, by building transport connections to people that are distant from the market and bring them into market catchment area is one of the solutions. The other one is that as male population is moving increasingly into towns and other opportunities, we are going to have more women on farms, and mostly women. Yields are lower, they don't get access to finance, they don't get. So if we are going to create that cadre of more professional farmers, I think we really need to focus much more on the women's side of that. And then there was this question about, how can big farmers and small farmers work together? The answer is definitely. There was a study looking at successful agribusiness models coming out of Africa, and the consistent theme was, it's not like they only work with smallholder farmers. They need to have a cadre of big farmers to be able to lower the transaction costs, and they are a mix of those. The work done by Thomas Jane at the moment, which is the emergence of the medium-scale farm in Africa, which is quite a phenomenon, quietly seen, but it's quite important that in the areas where there's a lot of those medium-scale farmers, the smaller scale farmers in their area, there's a positive ripple effect. their yields have gone up, they've taken up the technology, and there's an aggregation. So definitely there has to be a link between the big farms and the small farms. And the final piece that I'll just say, you know, so much of what I talk about is what the market is demanding. And there's definitely a move, staples is leveling off, fruit, vegetables, consumption going up, processed products going up, and animal proteins. Most of those are much higher output products, and they're labor intensive, which is one of the very few comparative advantages that a smallholder farmer has, that his labor costs are lower than a corporate farm. So the labor intensity of farming gives a preferential comparative advantage to a small scale farm. Over.
Right, thank you. Tran, what's your view on the sort of policy environment you think is needed to pick up some of these opportunities and perhaps tackle those that are being left behind? And your mic's on mute.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I most agree with the previous speaker, especially from Irish, because I think with the small farmers in Vietnam now, we have different kinds of policy. However, I think that there are three kinds of policy to support for farmers is very important. The first one, because they are very small, so it's very difficult for them to collect directly with the markets, and it's very difficult for them to sign the contract directly with the enterprise. That's why the cooperatives or the cooperation group is very important for them. That is the way that the Vietnam also try to push up. So it means that the first one, the policy should develop the cooperative for the small farmers, yeah, or the cooperation group. So I think it's the first one, and the second one is about the value chain linkage stimulation. In Vietnam, we also have one degree to support the value chain linkage from the farms to the markets. So in which, if the farm have a side contract with the enterprise, they will get the support. And also we also to have some special policy, especially in the credit or the training, if the enterprise sign the contract with the cooperative or the small farmer. That is the second thing. And the third thing about the credit support. In Vietnam, we have one separated credit program for the farmer and rural household. So in which if the farm or the rural household, if they have very good plan on business, they can borrow the money from the bank. And I think beside that, under the risky environment, I think one of the very important things for the small farmer is try to protect them from the different shock. For example, in Vietnam, you know that the live pig producer will suffer, how can I say, seriously from the swan, Africa swan fevers. That is a terrible thing for them. Or the pepper crop, fruit and vegetable, they also get a big suffer from the disease. Besides that, the small farmer also get the big suffer from the climate change impact. Even at the moment, all the farmers in the center of Vietnam were infected very badly because of flood. Yeah, and I think beside that, the farmers also have risky from the uncertainty of the market. So I think they are very risky. So beside all the supporting production or the market linkage, it's very important to have one mechanism to protect the farmer. So I think agriculture insurance is also a very important thing. So that is, I think there's some kinds of ours. I think it's very important that to support the small farmers and to make them how can I say, have an inclusive growth in the value chain. So thank you very much.
Right, thank you. I think that I guess that also brings us back into the whole discussion around what sort of perhaps insurance mechanisms you need, how you get maybe more effective social protection mechanisms that are linking into enabling that productivity in a risky environment.
Yeah.
Andrew, where do you see the main sort of policy directions going, and what if you had a chance to sort of tweak some policy levers to optimize what you see as a need, what would they be? Mike?
Done. I think, well, a lot of people have already kind of addressed the real need for policies that impact the smallholder farmers who actually benefit themselves. I think we really need to enact some policies that empower the environment that we're working in. And, you know, one of the words that we've not heard in this discussion is this is sustainability. And, you know, we're trying to change systems for the better, and we don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past, and these systems need to be sustainable. You know, I think there's a lot of policies that need to be put in place to ensure that sustainable solutions for the smallholder farmers are available. I talk with energy providers, off-the-grid energy providers, who are wanting to provide solutions to the smallholder farmers in the Philippines, and they said the number of hoops that they have to jump through to get energy solutions to these smallholder farmers is just incredible. And these are very creative solutions. They can empower whole little islands with some wave power or tidal streaming, and they can really you know, make a difference by powering not just the farms, but also small processing facilities. So we need to create this environment where the policies support the infrastructure that will help the farmers themselves, not just on-farm policies, but, you know, supporting policies, the non-agriculture policies, if you like.
Great, thank you, Andrew. I'm watching time here. We're going to have to start wrapping up. I mean, obviously, this is a conversation we could take on for a whole day, and it would probably be much nicer to be doing it in all a room together over a cup of coffee, rather than keeping to the constraints of people's attention span on a Zoom call. But I mean, I think you know, it's been really fascinating to hear the different perspectives, and I think there's a lot of coming together around how you put this whole challenge of small-scale agriculture into the bigger sort of food systems perspective, which I guess is where we're heading towards with the Food Systems Summit last year. But I think what I've also heard is, you know, quite a lot of optimism around the opportunities, but also this need to get a much more sort of integrated thinking around a whole lot of different policy mechanisms coming together. So maybe that's the challenge for the future. But let me go around and just get one very quick sort of final message from each of you, and then I'll just hand over to Ken for some last wrap-up comments. So Marlene, having heard all of this, what's your final big message you would like to leave the audience with? Mike?
Yeah, I think on the policy side, I shared to you yesterday that at the moment we are working with ASEAN on elevating the importance of rural development that brings together the key actors. Beyond rural development is the poverty eradication and rural development. And central to this is the whole idea of strengthening the territorial, more integrated approaches. But key to this is the political will of government to support this kind of a comprehensive approach, which is from the initial scoping study that we are doing, does not really exist in most countries in the region. So this is an important call for us, and we hope that working with ASEAN, we can work together to help them set that framework that could get the member states be inspired by how other countries are doing it, that a rural development framing that puts centrality to the important role of farmers' organization, agri-cooperatives, that they could steer the economic development in certain localities, whether it's at the village level or at the municipal or provincial level. There are models that exist in Europe and many other countries. Even in the Philippines, we have those where agri-cooperatives are taking lead role in developing their villages and their barangays. And if we are able to support this, then this concern for some sectors, communities being left behind, that issue should be responded to, because we are the approach is territorial, and that brings in the participation of the different sectors in that community. So so that would be my
Thank you, Melaine.
my dream.
Very interesting to hear, and I'm getting very caught here about desperately wanting to give all of you a lot more time to hear the fascinating thoughts you've got and needing to keep time. So let's move. Tran, do you have a final short key message that you would like to share with us from what you've heard this afternoon? And your mic.
Sorry. This discussion is very useful. At the moment, the government of Vietnam will organize one of the very important meetings we call all the donors international meetings, and this is the annual meeting that the government of Vietnam organizes every year. And this year, the government topic focus on the agriculture in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. So in which we will try to assess the different impact of COVID-19 on different on agricultural sector in general, and also on the different stakeholders, including the enterprise, cooperative trader, and especially the farmers. So I think this is a very good conference for me to learn from all the different speakers, especially you share your experience and the policy response. Yeah. So, however, because sometimes the internet is disconnected, I cannot hear all your opinions. So, if possible, you can give maybe you can give us like a summarize, and after that you can share for all the people. So based on that, I can take some like innovation idea, so I can add into my presentation, because in the annual meeting, I will propose some kind of the policy for the government. So I hope that I can pick up some very interesting idea from the other countries. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll definitely make the material available to you in a summarized form, and the videos will also be available. Fabrizio, a brief final reflection.
Yeah, Jim, thanks. Let's. One thing is about also the perspective. So the nice thing about Southeast Asia and East Asia is that it's a dynamic region of the world. Now, of course, the COVID-19 has been hitting hard, but no, looking forward, I think we can expect that this region of the world to resume its dynamism in terms of overall growth. This makes the issue of lifting living standards in rural areas much easier than in other areas of the world. So this is a very first important point. Second, I think we need to be cognizant of the fact that rural areas are populated by households that have different endowments, different skills, different capacities, right? So the role of public policy is to make sure that rural households can make the best out of the assets that they have, and also help them invest in assets. And by assets, I mean not only land, it's also education, health, and so forth, right? We need to be able to create an environment whereby households that want to exit farming can do so in a way that lifts their living standards. They don't have to be pushed out. So it requires combining land policies, educational policies, new farm policies, where the new farm policies need to give more flexibility to farmers regarding what they want to cultivate and how they can actually get this to the market. And of course, consolidation through cooperatives and so forth is part of the equation. But it's that kind of picture and optimism that I think we need to always be mindful when we think about the future of smallholder farming in Southeast Asia and East Asia.
Right. Thank you, Fabrizio. Andrew, I'll go Andrew, Graham, and finish off with Irish.
All right, thank you, Jim. I'm like Fabrizio. I'm really optimistic and excited about what's going on here in the region at the moment, and particularly excited with the number of young people who are getting involved in agriculture. I'm associated with 3 different accelerators, and the ideas and the energy that are coming out of those groups from all around the region, from internationally. Some of these accelerators are in Singapore, others are around the region. These people are really wanting to get involved and using some great new technology and ideas. So I'm excited. We must, though, like I said in my earlier comments, remember that we're working with people. We're working for people and with people. And they're just like us. They have concerns and needs, and we need to take those on board. And we can't ride roughshod over their sensibilities and concerns.
Thank you. Graham?
Yeah, so I mean, I would divide it up into a sort of twin track approach. I think I think in your classification, you've had those that are hanging in, and clearly we have a responsibility to make sure that the process of change doesn't hurt them, and to make their lives as easy and as comfortable and reduce their disadvantages as you can. But the second track is this incredible change that's going on in the food systems, and that we have to walk forward looking at the future and the changes that are happening, and that this is not only will be creating a lot of opportunities and increasing the flow of cash into the rural economy if we can keep the farming sector competitive, but it also will generate a number of jobs into the rural space. And these are in the broader rural economy, and some of them will be people who are providing services to that cadre of professional farmers. Some of them will be the spillover income that will be generating as more cash goes into the rural economy, the hairdressers and the people who fix bicycles and so on. So, you know, I'd like Andrew, like Fabrizio, yeah, I'm very confident about the future, and I love what Andrew said about this cadre of young people that are investing in the food space. And often they don't come from farming backgrounds, they come from finance, they come from technology, but they have the potential to transform. And one of the things that they consistently say to us is, I do wish the regulatory burden wasn't quite as heavy on us. So we have to fill in the same forms as a multinational, and their access to finance is a real problem. And I think we need to support them if we're going to create this more modern, more dynamic, and more economically powered rural economy. Over.
Great. Thank you, Graham. And Iris, some final reflections from you.
Yeah, just last 2 points. I think we have heard a lot of thoughts on, you know, the empowerment of youth and also women. So in Alpha, we are seeing now that more and more women and youth are getting engaged in high value crops, of course, because they wanted to increase their income. And also they are more into processing or value addition and marketing. And I think it has been emphasized that they really need support so they can be integrated well in the agri-food value chain. And we also know that women in Asia has been contributing to food security. So in Alpha, we are calling forth for policies that promote fair access to agriculture and natural resources, and also to make markets safer for women farmers.
Lovely, thank you. Well, look, we're a little bit over time. I've thoroughly enjoyed this discussion. I think there's been a lot of fun.
Hello.
Also some really important.
Hello. I just have one last. I'm sorry. I have only one. Under the eFast support. Hello?
Yes, yeah, we're listening to you, Tran. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so under the eFast support, we did the we call the quick assessment on the impact of COVID on the smallholders, farmers, and vulnerable rural households. So we just finished that. So if you need that, I can share with you. Did it also the quite good report, and we did the survey for 1,100 small farmers. So thank you very much.
Thank you. That would be really appreciated, and we'll post a link to that on the site for the eDialogue.
Yeah, and if you have same research on your country, please share with me, because I'm really, as I mentioned, I really want to take experience from you guys. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So Let me hand back to Ken just to wrap us up and maybe give a couple of last words of reflection. And as he's doing that, I'll share my screen to show you at least how Ken has been adding thoughts into the mural that we've been using.
Well, thanks very much indeed. And thanks to all of the panelists. I mean, I've really learned a huge amount today. I work primarily these days in rural Africa in terms of our own work. And I'm to be honest, I'm really jealous when I hear of all this incredible dynamism going on in East Asia. And I think particularly these trends of consolidation, the trends of farms getting bigger, of market development are really, really fascinating. I think reflecting on this point about, who's getting left behind, and I think one of the things that comes out to me very much is the idea, if you like, of fair work for the laborers who would still be working in some of the larger farms, when these service industries are going to be developing and triggering, if you like, lots of other rural employment, that would also be employment which gives people fair incomes and the like. When I was typing these sticky notes and I was making notes and then popping them in, what really struck me is that certainly to start off within the discussion on the first comments, so many of the comments were about institutions, about markets, inputs, outputs, linking farmers to markets and getting that whole environment within which farming takes place to operate better. And that was really populated very strongly. And then later on in the discussion, we started moving then to think more about policies, and the bottom right-hand corner of this thing of sticky notes now has got quite a few points there. Just to reinforce to everybody that this is part of an ongoing dialogue. We've got another set of regional sessions coming up, South Asia next, then Latin America, Africa, and then a roundup session. And Jim and I are committed to actually pulling all of this together and sharing it back with you. So on our websites, we'll have summaries of the discussions today. People can watch back the webinar for today. And then we're moving on in November to sessions on pathways, and then finally on policies at a more global level. And this will all feed into the IFAD Rural Development Report for 2021, which we're currently involved in writing. So on behalf of the Thematic Network on Sustainable Agriculture and Food Systems, on Foresight for Food, IFAD, APRA, thanks for joining us. Thanks to all of our panelists and to you for attending. If you have any other questions, please contact us through the websites. Thanks very much. And at that point, I think it's time to wish you a great rest of your day, and thanks to everybody for your inputs.